Good afternoon and welcome to the Overview and Scrutiny Management Committee meeting. Membership of the committee, we have apologies from Councillor Taylor. Could I ask committee members please to introduce themselves? Councillor Ramsey.
Hello, I'm Councillor Ramsey and I'm the lead for Health and Adult Social Care Scrutiny.
Councillor Marchington.
Andrew Marchington, lead member for Children and Young People.
Councillor Yusuf Hussain, and I'm the chair for the Economy and Neighbourhood Scrutiny Committee.
And I'm Councillor Liz Snage and I'm chair of the Overview Scrutiny Management Committee. So as I said, apologies from Councillor Taylor, who's the lead member for Corporate Scrutiny. Minutes to previous meeting. The papers have been circulated. Today's meeting was due to happen on the 13th of September, but was obviously postponed. So the minutes of the previous meeting are from the 26th of July. They've been circulated. Is everybody okay with those minutes? Yes, thank you. I've just got a couple of items to update on. So the Kirklees Employment and Skills Plan, which had been subject to pre-decision scrutiny in April of this year, was adopted by Cabinet on the 26th of July. And Cabinet requested the submission of regular progress reports on the delivery plan, and the Economy and Neighbourhood Scrutiny Panel would undertake further scrutiny as necessary on that. Further to pre-decision scrutiny by this committee at meetings in November 21 and June 22, the Communities Partnership Plan 22 to 27 was endorsed by Cabinet on the 21st of September. It will go to the 12th of October council meeting for that for approval. Okay. All right. Do any members have any interests they need to declare this time? No. Okay. If anything comes up, just fill the form in, please. This meeting is open to the public and is being webcast live, and the recording will be able to view on the council's website after the meeting. All items are in public. We've no notification of deputations or petitions, and we've no questions at this time. So we move swiftly on to item 7, Community Anchor Network. The report is in the papers pack, and I believe Jill and Mags are here, and we have Carol from the Huddersfield Mission and Tom from Third Sector Leaders as well. So do you want to introduce yourselves before you start? Is it Jill or Mags that's going to start? Mags.
Good afternoon, my name's Mags Rogerson and I'm the Head of Local Integrated Partnerships.
Hello, I'm Tom Taylor. I'm the Community Anchors Lead working for Third Sector Leaders Kirklees.
Hello, I'm Carol Roberts. I'm the Community Manager at Huddersfield Mission and I'm the local anchor work there.
We're on the screen, aren't we? So I just want to start off by explaining the purpose of the report, and that it is to provide an update on the progress of the work completed to date. So the contract was developed to strengthen the voluntary and community sector network across Kirklees. It was approved by Cabinet on the 27th of July 2021, allowing grant distribution of £360,000 over a 2-year period to commence on the 1st of September 2021. With a robust VCSE-led selection process to identify the key lead anchors across Kirklees, with the work commencing in the communities from the 1st of October 2021. Following Cabinet, we were asked to attend to provide an update 12 months on. So the focus of the work is on relationship building and information sharing rather than specific target-driven outcomes. However, the work does achieve positive outcomes supported by rich community stories. The anchor offer also supports the Kirklees-wide social prescribing service with our community services to ensure we have community provision accessible to our residents in the places that they choose. So following the identification of the lead anchors, the network was strengthened by the addition of local anchors, growing from 4 in October 2021 to 10 in July 2022. 15 community anchor organisations are now funded by the project, and there is one lead anchor taking a coordinated role in each of the 4 Kirklees areas, so rural, Dewsbury and Mirfield, Batley and Spen and Huddersfield. So in terms of monitoring of the contract and the grant distribution, anchors were required to provide a high-level forward plan for the entire contract on which they report against quarterly. The plan allows for flexibility to support unforeseen circumstances. So, for example, setting up the community transport for the Ukrainian refugees. Grants are paid out of the funding provided through the NHS contracts to the anchors on a quarterly basis once monitoring reports have been received and signed off. Over 300 community and voluntary organisations or groups have engaged with the Community Anchor Network. Locality plans are developed and their aim is to capture key concerns, hopes and issues from community organisations and provide comment and analysis by community anchor organisations. The locality plan aims to complement and add to, but not duplicate, the information and plans made by public sector services and strategic bodies. They support the direction of work for the anchors that the anchors undertake. The locality plans are still in the early stages of development and are being reviewed for how useful they are in real-time delivery at a neighbourhood level. And then finally, I want to speak to you about how the Anchor Network is being promoted and engaging with the local ward councillors. So currently, we have a communication plan in place, which is community run, and it involves things like council meetings and community-led network meetings. The anchors are attending the Kirklees-wide place-based working hubs to provide additional information to the frontline staff that are employed by the council. They've got printed postcards which are being delivered to community organisations to promote the offer. Third sector leaders have a new website with a page dedicated to the anchor offer. Email updates are being sent through to the ward councillors, and there is currently some councillor engagement workshops that have commenced from September and will continue to with each of the ward areas. And that's the 5-minute brief update. If there's any questions for myself or either of the anchor partners, that'd be lovely. Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions they wish to ask? Can I just ask, then I'll start it off. So you're saying in your report that you identify and support existing third sector organisations to take on the community anchor role. And in your drawing, excuse me, I've got a cold. You've just got a few, you've got your main anchor organisation in each of the 4 areas, but then you've just got a few community anchor organisations. So how are you going to grow and support those anchor organisations that operate in just, they have their own areas of geography that they operate in? Thank you.
I think the key thing for us is that the lead anchor organisations are voluntary and community organisations that are really well established and have a strong infrastructure around them. Our local anchors are those that are really embedded in a hyper-local way in those communities. And what we look to do with the network is that the lead organisations provide peer support to those smaller local anchor organisations. So that could be with anything that they're wanting to do in terms of their development as a really local organisation. Does that answer your question, or are you talking about support in a different way?
Because are you looking for organisations that have capacity, so have staff themselves, or are you looking for organisations that are just volunteers? Do you know, is it a mix, or is it, what capacity do the organisations need to have to be anchor?
So in terms of the large lead anchor organisations, the funding, the grant distribution funds capacity within those organisations for them to be able to do the work. We do recognise that some of those local organisations that are voluntary run wouldn't necessarily want funding for a post within them. So the funding is then flexed to best support them. So for example, it might be that we fund the use of a community space, which they use in terms of their anchor role, but that activity and support is delivered on a voluntary basis.
Councillor Marchington, did you have a question?
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. Thank you for the work that you're doing. I suppose it follows on from Councillor Smager's question, and it's probably I'm going to ask Tom and Carol about that. So your relationship as lead anchor organisations or third sector leaders with the council within this framework, does that feel, how's that working? Mags, sorry, that's right, Mags. Talked about that building relationships. Do you think that's working well? Is it in a journey? And then also, I think it builds on Liz's question about that relationship between yourselves and the smaller organisations, and how is the framework working in that respect?
You're right to say to ask that question, because it is all about relationships and partnership. This is a slightly different way of working to how we've approached this problem before in Kirklees. And so we're kind of finding our way together. The relationship with MAGs and third sector leaders has been a really helpful and positive one. We spent some time, and MAGs will back me up on this, it took us until January to really get some clarity about what we were trying to achieve and what were the boundaries that were acceptable to the council and we thought would work in the sector. So there was some negotiation there, and that's been a very positive and supportive process. With community organisations, and the question about capacity is a relevant one too, it's not usual for established community organisations to support other community organisations with their development. There is a bit of a sense of competition in the sector for funding, for spaces, for that kind of thing. And third sector leaders have been very much about let's collaborate, let's work together, let's support that. And the anchors has strengthened those partnerships. It's not perfect, there's still a way to go, but it really is making a difference and building the trust in the sector.
That's great. Can I just pursue that a little bit? So I'm glad it sounds like a journey, so you think that it's a productive journey even though there's way to go. So, and I think the phrase that I like, I've heard in other parts of the council, it's who's best placed to deal with something. So if the council's not been parochial about saying, well, we need to do that. So do you think that that's working for yourselves as anchor organisation? Do you feel that you're being used as a who's best placed organisation, and do some of the smaller groups feel that as well, that they're being supported to do things because it's the right group to deliver those needs in that community, rather than it being just convenient? So.
I think the principle is right, that those established community organisations that know what it's like to run a community organisation, they've got the experience, they've got the connections and the knowledge in that area or in that sector, that they're the ones that we want smaller community groups to go to, or people who want to set up new groups, or groups that are really struggling. It makes sense to go, to people who've got experience of what that's really like. So yes, a partnership, but I think you're right about best placed, and I think the established local third sector organisations are best placed to do this work.
I was going to add to that as well, that I think it goes back to the principles that are in the Inclusive Communities framework that has been released recently, that we're putting that trust in our communities and they have the best knowledge to best support themselves.
Can I ask, you talk about capacity and support. are some areas operating better than others at this moment in time? Or some areas finding their feet a little bit more difficult? It's just I noticed certainly back in Spain you'd only got 2 of the smaller anchors. It's when you say about helping groups, so who does that? Is it the main anchor or is it the smaller anchors? Or how do they go about doing that? How do people know that they're there to do that? You know, it's I'm afraid it's still a mystery to me as to how that's operating. Thank you.
The lead anchors, one of the 5 aims that they have is to build, reach out to the people who perhaps they don't already have contact with. So that's the expectation. They've got a member of staff, or maybe they share it across a couple of people, but they are expected to be trying to reach new contacts and reach out. Not everyone is ready to take on a piece of development work as an organisation. They might just want to carry on doing what they're doing at the moment. Local anchors too are expected to respond when a community group comes and says, we're struggling with a health and safety policy, or our funding is going to run out in 6 months' time, or nobody's coming to our activities. They're expected to help themselves if they can, and tap into the wider knowledge and expertise of the whole anchor network, all currently 15 organisations, to say, do you know anyone who can help with this? Can you help this group with this? So we work as a network as well as the small organisations.
Okay, I probably come from an area that is that very few community groups are part of third sector leaders. I would say that it's not well known that if you're having problems with those things, where to go, or what to do, and where to go. So I think that is a key. Councillor Ramsey, you want to come in?
Thank you very much. I think I just wanted to touch on the stronger kind of organisations that you've got that are involved, and how I'm talking about your lead organisations and how they are supporting their peers. Or are you saying all of the 4 lead organisations are at a level where they are singing and dancing and can support those localities? Is that what you were saying?
I singing and dancing, there's some singing and dancing. I wouldn't say that all of the lead anchor organisations are perfect in every way, and their development has stopped. There still is some development and to go there, but they are established, knowledgeable organisations that can support the development of other organisations. They can provide advice around governance, they can provide training and support.
That's lovely. I'm just thinking of the experience that I've got locally within Dewsbury and Murfield, and how things are panning out. And I suppose a bit like Liz, we have our engagement event as councillors this week, I think it is. So I'm still learning a little bit about it. But I am part of a community organisation as well, and would always turn to third sector leaders, I'll be honest, because that's the natural place that will go. And I haven't particularly turned to our anchor organisation, but I'm not sure our anchor organisation knows much about us either, you know. So I was trying to understand the mapping exercise that people will have done in those patches, because I thought what you said around competition and duplication, I think that's a concern. Obviously, you're trying very hard to manage that, but when we've got limited resources, if there is duplication and there is a lead anchor organisation, you would hope that somebody will chat to the groups, because there's so much work to be done. There's no need to be fighting over the same kind of activities. So I'd just like your information, input on that.
So we're a local anchor reporting into a lead anchor, and from our point of view, this role really helps to avoid that duplication because we're all talking to each other much, much more than we would be, I think, if we were just sat as our own voluntary sector organisations. So I feel very well supported by the lead anchor. That's definitely somewhere I could turn if I needed to. But I'm also very aware now of the other anchors and what they can offer. And I think one of the things I was thinking, it's not necessarily geographical. So started off being quite geographically based, but actually as we get to know each other better and build that, you might say, actually, I know somebody over there who geographically it might not make sense, but I know the skills are more particular for that situation. And as people approach or as you get to know different people, I think that network is really strong. And I've personally found that very supportive for people.
That's lovely. So what you're giving is a message that 12 months on, the lead anchor organisations are supporting the local anchor organisations. I suppose what would be really lovely then is for us to then be in a situation where we've actually got the local community groups feeling supported as well, and that's where that's where we get to a different stage. Okay, I think the only other thing is I was reading the locality plans for North and South, and obviously they're slightly different the way that they've been pulled together. And I might be being a bit harsh, but I don't know exactly what's happening where, when, how, who from them, that they are nice, wordy. You know, the words are all nice, and I understand where people are coming from, but I don't know whether that's fair, and I'd like your comments on that.
I think one of the things that we talked about when we talked about setting up and developing the locality plans was the practicality of that mapping and knowing every single thing that was happening, where, when, who was delivering it, because it is such a changing picture. And with the pressures that are on the community at the moment in terms of the reduction of number of volunteers, the pressures on opening community buildings, there was a danger of producing something that then is very quickly out of date. So what we wanted the locality plans to be is a really useful tool in terms of those partnership relations and giving that guide in terms of where somebody can turn to. Now, there are other things that are being in development alongside the council in terms of mapping that community provision. So there's a pilot project happening at the moment in terms of a new community directory. So in terms of not doing duplication, that was something that we talked about in terms of those locality plans.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean particularly about what specifically was happening. You know, yoga on a Wednesday. I wasn't particularly talking about that. I was looking at it as an action plan of developing that locality. So that's where I was coming from. And if I use, I promise this is my last one. But if we look at some of the council's aspiration about youth services, for instance. I don't know how that interfaces with some of the stuff that's in here. And I heard what you said about your meeting with the place-based officers, but I wasn't pulling it out from the locality plan about how that interface would be. And yet it's an aspiration that we've all got, that we provide better youth services, isn't it? So I'll leave you to that if you want to comment.
I think it's fair comment on the locality plans. It's the idea is, how do we get the voice from the community organisations that the anchors are in contact with, and the insight and the intelligence? How do we summarise that and present that? And this first draft is an attempt to say, this is what people are saying to us, these are their concerns, these are their difficulties, because there's not a lot of point us working through what the stats say or what the current needs are, because the council and other partners do that. But we do have the ear, and we are listening to community organisations. So let's try and communicate that. But we need to simplify them and aligned them with other things, and we need to do more work on them. So maybe we can come back on that.
Councillor Zaid.
Thank you, Chair. My question is probably really straightforward, hopefully. I'm just out of interest wanting to know how often the anchor leads meet with the local leads. How regularly do you have meetings?
It does vary. In Huddersfield, they meet every 2 weeks, I think. Yeah. I know in Dewsbury, it's not been as regular as that. I don't know exactly how often they meet. In the valleys, we have a kind of emerging network, and one of those networks is a partnership of 3 organisations. And so they're now in regular contact and are sharing information and working together. So it is different in different areas. In Huddersfield, it's a very regular 2 weekly. And then the whole anchor network meets quarterly, and the lead anchors meet as a network every month.
Okay, so just to clarify, if, for instance, Batley and Spen, how often would you meet there?
Ryan, who coordinates that, has a monthly Our Community Forum meeting, which brings together the anchors, but also any other community organisation who wants to join to share information about what's going on.
The reason why I asked that, I think a lot of theory says effective teams meet quite regularly. I'm just wanting to know why there's a difference between meeting 2 weekly in Huddersfield and monthly in other areas. What's the rationale behind meeting less often?
I think, for me, I don't want to take the people doing this valuable work in our communities away from what they want to do and pull them into meetings too often. But it is up to each area how often they feel it's useful to meet. I think we can over-meet. I think, there's lots to do in our communities, and there's lots of passionate people who want to do it. So it's a fair question, I think, about what is an effective routine. We're still working it out, I think.
I mean, the reason I ask that, and I totally agree with you, meeting too often is sometimes not, but following off from what Councillor Ramsey said and my colleagues here, it's just how effective do we work moving forward, looking at the current climate at the minute. We are probably going to rely more on the voluntary sector for certain services, and I'm just wondering how, moving forward, we could, I guess, structurally, how does this work? And I think Councillor Smidge touched upon that. What's the structure for us members to understand how we work in regards to yourself, but also moving forward, how the voluntary sector supports the community more effectively, avoiding duplication of third sector organisations, but also trying to support the community, but also being sustainable in doing that. What we don't want to be doing is overloading the voluntary sector, but at the same time being mindful that's the sector we rely on to provide work on the ground. So I think, what's your vision in terms of the next 6 months, in terms of how you see your team and the service moving forward?
I see this work as part of, and it's not the whole thing, is part of building resilient communities that can respond to all the opportunities and needs that face them. And to do that effectively, we can only do it in partnership. The council has staff teams and lots of resources that are going into achieving that same objective. I think what's key to it, though, is that we enable communities to do what they want to do, to start from where they are, to organise how they want to organise, to use their own assets and get control of those assets to meet the needs of the community. So I guess the closest I can get to a vision with it is that we start from wherever communities are at and support them and encourage them to organise and be inclusive. I don't have a structure as yet. Perhaps that will evolve.
I think it's also recognising the informal meetings that happen. So where there are local anchors that are working together or dropping in at each other's activities, it's those formal meetings that supplement the more structured ones as well.
Councillor Ramsey.
I'm sorry, I just, it's on the back of what you were just saying there about leaving it to the communities to come forward. And I suppose it's just a really simple question about equity, because we know that we actually need to handhold some communities, and perhaps the reason there are less local anchors in Dewsbury and Batley and Spen, which you can see on your diagram, is because there's more hand-holding required in some of those areas of deprivation. So yes, I agree that that's what we should do, but sometimes it does need that additional effort, and I'd just like you to comment on that, please.
Absolutely agree with you, and I didn't mean to leave communities to it. I meant to start with their concerns, with their assets, with their history, with their skills. But you're absolutely right. If we're going to achieve this across Kirklees, then some areas will need much more support and much more input than others. And what I hope is that by building the network, we can have areas that are good at this, or perhaps have more history in it, or have more assets or resources to begin to share their skills and support other parts of the district. And we're trying to build those alliances across Kirklees.
Can I ask a question? I think understanding the geography of the different areas is extremely helpful when it comes to this work. And I would have hoped that the anchors would have gone out to all the different community groups and spoken to them individually and said, you know, right, okay, this is what we can help with. What's your strengths and what you're struggling with after the pandemic and things like this. I would have hoped that would have helped build a stronger network, actually. But can I ask about your locality plans, please? And where these fit in all the locality plans that we have. Because we have place standard action plans, we have different plans at ward level, with different plans at locality level. And we also have a role for some councillors in conjunction with the PCN as well. And they, I understand, as part of that role, would be talking about priorities as well for their areas. So can I ask where these locality plans fit in, and how you're talking to ward councillors to ensure that all the plans for their areas actually jigsaw together, so that one plan is not pushing against another plan? Thanks.
I think it's a massive area for development in terms of the locality plans. They're only just starting to be developed alongside the anchor offer. And I think it's something that is a valid point and we need to look at. I'm hoping that the councillor workshops will support some of this in terms of where they're best placed to fit, how they're best placed to be communicated, and then the cross-referenced.
Councillor March.
Yeah, it's just picking up on Councillor Ramsey's point about different levels of activity in different areas. And I'll phrase this as a question rather than past experience working. I mean, I know Councillor Smage and I have both been responsible for this area of work over the years, over the decades. So really good, those areas where you get really high uptake and really positive, you know, things seem to be going really well. It'd be interesting to know why that is and what the issues are, and those areas where it's more difficult. Just a way of assessing the effectiveness of that. And it's the issue, when you're talking about supporting groups and hand-holding, I think is a phrase that's been used for a long time. And just working out how effective that is. So if there's some from a scrutiny perspective, we can just say why, you know, it works, you know, we get more groups coming forward, we get more effective, we get more people who are best placed to do that. in some areas than in others. And actually somebody make a note of it, and actually so we're not revisiting that time and time and time again. So it's a phrase as a question rather than me saying why I think that, because it just, again, it just rung true with, visits I made a long time ago with community support workers and groups they were working with and their experience, and that sort of knowledge seems to have been lost a little bit. So let's not, let's try and think over time, generationally, we can, give communities the support that they need. So, what mechanism to just evaluate, just have a mechanism to evaluate what is working really well and why.
I'm not sure whether I'm quite going to answer your question, but I think from our point of view, one of the informal structures really of the Anchor programme is this idea of connecting and supporting and uniting community groups. And for me, that's really, for us at the mission, that's helped me reframe how we work with groups. So if I meet somebody from a group or talk to someone from a group, it's not just about me helping, it's thinking about where I can connect that up with somebody else. So, obviously we don't have the capacity to join everybody up in every way. So it's like, so if I can connect somebody with somebody else there, they might support somebody else here. And that mindset of I need to help isn't actually always, that can be quite difficult with capacity-wise, but I need to connect and support and unite is a very different way of looking at things. And I have found that really powerful in terms of when I've worked with groups and thought, actually, yes, the most helpful person here isn't me, potentially. It's that group there, and they might be out of area. I don't think that really matters. And this network of anchors also gives us that scope to say, I'm working with this group. I'm sure I heard somebody talking about this group and joining them up that way. It's not very formal, and I think that's the nature of it also, is that a lot of the time these things aren't necessarily, I don't go out with a community anchor badge on particularly. It's all about being present and being available and supporting people in that way. And I would also say that some people need an hour, and some people you might be working with, forever in certain ways. So it's quite difficult to pigeonhole in that kind of, side.
It's the forever stuff.
Yeah.
Because it's a very different relationship.
Okay, any more questions? No? So, thank you for coming today. So I've got support local community capacity, your communications, your locality plans, working on those, building capacity more effectively and in places where some extra work may be needed than others. And I'm wondering if the committee would like to see the locality plans at some point in time, or would you like to do that by email or by meeting, just as a follow-up when they're ready, presumably in 12 months' time? Yeah. Yeah, we could have a look at them. Yeah, okay. Just to see how you're doing across Kirklees. All right. Give you 12 months to build the capacity, because it is going to be challenging, isn't it, over the next 12 months for the voluntary sector. Okay, thank you ever so much for coming today. Thank you. Okay then, so we're going to just pause a minute before we move to item 8. Thank you. Welcome back. We now move to item 8, which is another report on the loneliness and social isolation work that we're undertaking. Before we move to the report, I just want to report to the committee that as part of the visits that we talked about last time, I've visited the Long COVID group, I've spoken to the Love to Meet You group, and I've talked to the Yorkshire Children's Centre as well, and I have observed the Loneliness Steering Group meeting. Okay. All right, Jill, over to you for the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smage. So I'll just introduce with a little bit of context to the Loneliness Steering Group, which is the focus of the report that you have had. It was developed during 2018-2019. It was with a wide range of partners that we pulled together to develop that vision about what do we collectively do around loneliness, realising that it wasn't something that just fell to one service or one particular role. The vision that that group co-produced together was about Kirklees being a place where people and communities are more connected and support each other to develop meaningful relationships and reduce loneliness. And that has really framed at the start of that work everything that we did to contribute to that. There was a conference on loneliness in 2020, which was a few weeks just before the national lockdown, which, besides the lockdown in itself and the impact that that had on loneliness, also did impact on the work that we were able to do, because there was at that conference great energy and great support for developing this work further and really taking it forward. The group has developed some key strategic priorities and a role based on the feedback from that conference, and also from the pieces of work that Helen and other colleagues have also undertaken, including with some public health colleagues at the time. It continued to operate through 21 and 22, and there has been some review work which we'll hand over to Helen to update on that. I think it's really clear there is a real commitment from the steering group to continue that work. It has started to review what it needs to do to rebuild and refocus its purpose, so that there is some real clear objectives about what it does focus on, because loneliness and isolation is so broad. It is really important that there is a focus that feels like we are achieving things rather than retaining in that more academic space around understanding it, so that there is a balance of how we strategically bring our resources to make an impact for people in Kirklees relating to that vision. And I really think this is a great opportunity to get some feedback on that review work and shape the work of that steering group as we go forward. So I'll just hand over to Helen. Thank you.
Hi, Helen Gilchrist from Local Integrated Partnerships. I'll just give you a bit of a précis. I know you've all had all of the papers already, but I'll give you a bit of a précis on what we came up with in terms of the key bits of the role, the steering group. Okay, so we had a review in 2022, and this was with all the existing members. They were invited to feedback what they thought about the current role of the steering group. And we put forward quite a wide range of different options, actually, because, cease having a steering group at all. Is it better if we just champion things within our own networks? Do we want to link more to place-based strategies? Because it's so broad, and obviously working in that place-based way is really, really key. We've just heard from the discussion today about the importance of that and the different issues in different communities. So do we want to have it more place-based? That was one of the options put forward. We wondered, because the scope is so broad, and whether we wanted separate strategies across different life stages. Would that be a more effective way of doing things? And also, would we want it nested under something like the mental wellbeing strategy? because it sits very, very closely with that. So we explored lots of different things, and we also offered it up to other people to chair and lead it. I mean, the council is leading it at the moment, but actually, you know, we don't have to lead it. It could be another organisation that leads it or co-chairs it, but there wasn't a great appetite at the time for anybody else to particularly take that on. So we're continuing to do that as a council. Following on from that, we decided to continue with the approach of having the broad strategy group. There was acceptance that that was what people wanted, because it offers a lot of synergy across the different life stages and learning and kind of shadowing of different things that are happening across different life stages, to keep that going, but to meet slightly less frequently. One of the key challenges really has been just people being so busy during the pandemic, doing the day job, getting people together just to really have that capacity to meet and to drive things forward, because it's been a very, very challenging time. And as we're coming out of it, we need to sort of review that again. So they wanted to meet more on a quarterly basis, but at the last steering group meeting, we talked about the need to maybe meet a little bit more frequently again, to keep the movement going and keep it rolling. So I'll just give you a very quick overview of what's been sort of suggested to be the role of the group for now, before I give you a chance to sort of shape that and think that through. So the first thing that we talked about was having making sure that we're owning and driving the strategy. That's one of the key roles. It's like owning it and driving it forward. All the members of the group need to own that and drive that forward and champion it. That includes taking a proactive approach. It includes championing the work, and it includes trying to support the flexibility of the work in terms of emerging issues and trying to keep those links with national developments. The next one was to understand local needs and identify opportunities for developments based on that. And that's making best use of any available intelligence and using that to set priorities and identify gaps. The third one was to continue with trying to make loneliness everyone's business. We know that actually it's a huge undertaking. It's not one organisation or one project that's going to solve this. It needs to be a whole systems-led approach. You know, we're looking at all the different enablers and things that can contribute to it. So it's about influencing our citizens, our communities, our frontline workers, our planners and systems leaders to take action and to make loneliness everyone's business, and trying to promote that wider partnership working and networking to share good practice. The fourth one is about keeping a watchful eye on progress and helping to unblock barriers. And that would be to try and look at the outputs and outcomes of specific projects and the overall long-term impact of loneliness through the CLIC survey. Keep an eye on that. Offering support to overcome barriers and trying to make sure that there's enough resource to maintain progress, and reporting back where necessary up to the Health and Wellbeing Board or relevant boards. The proposed membership at the moment, we had a very, very wide partnership group that sort of grew sort of organically, which we slimmed down during the pandemic just because of people's capacity, and we wanted to kind of take forward some of the stuff from the conference. But the proposed membership at the moment is a number of people who are already on the group, such as Kirklees Council, Local Integrated Partnerships, Local Area Coordination and Public Health, Kirklees Children and Family Services, Northup Hall Child and Family Trust, Joe Cox Foundation, Befriending Partnership and their representatives, Community Anchor, Input, Kirklees Integrated Care Partnership, Mental Health Commissioning, Locala, Citizens Representation, Housing, Social Care, Strategic Refugee Asylum Seeker Lead Rep, Active Citizens and Democracy, and Huddersfield Town Foundation. So that's a précis of where we're at. So just like to invite some suggestions and ideas about how we can take this forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll open it up for questions. Does anybody have any questions, Councillor Ramsey? Oh, good. Well, yes, if you will, please.
Thank you very much. It sounds like quite a large steering group that you've got and a lot of engagement from a lot of different organisations. And if you're meeting once a quarter, I suppose in my head I'm trying to think, is it a networking event that people enjoy or a bit of a talking shop, or is it actually having an impact? And I think for me, if one of the aims was to train grassroots staff to ensure that they can identify loneliness and know what to do with it. I think if I'd have read that, and if it's in there, I'm sorry, I've missed it. Then I think, oh well, we're doing something, and you might be able to see what impact that's actually been able to have. But I'm not 100% certain what specifically we're doing, other than ensuring that people are aware of it at a strategic level, possibly in organisations, and we're hoping that, excuse the phrase, it'll trickle down to the people that are actually doing the job. All right, I'll let you comment.
Yeah, it's interesting that you raised the stuff about the grassroots, actually, because that is a piece of work that we've been wanting to do in terms of pulling a project together to understand how best to approach the subject and get people to feel more confident to ask those questions, because loneliness is quite stigmatised and it's not something that you just ask out of the blue. You don't say, are you lonely necessarily? So it's about trying to do that, and that is definitely a piece of work that we are planning to do. We just need to get some resource to start rolling that out when we've got the capacity.
I'll just follow up on that, and I've got one more question, if that's all right. Obviously, all organisations have some kind of training and development programme, some of which is mandatory, and some of which could I'm sure, accommodate under a wellness agenda, something as significant as this. So, but I'll leave you with that. My second question was around the primary care networks and how you think you're actually going to dovetail with the primary care networks. Because if I was looking at it now, afresh from a distance, I would think that the people who should be owning this agenda are the people that are sitting around those tables. And they are, some of them will be grassroots workers or responsible for grassroots workers directly, not strategic, that will perhaps be able to do something there. So I'm just interested in that, and I'm sure primary care networks will crop up again in other conversations.
Yeah, if I could just answer in the first instance. Absolutely. We do need to make sure that where there are points of contact, there is an ability to identify and respond, and that is, one of those key contacts is within our primary care networks. We do have a number of council staff in and around undertaking non-clinical roles in primary care networks, and that is a really high priority for them and that work. And I think it is very much in the mind of a lot of GP practices around what they see in their waiting rooms through that impact. So I think there is an open door and a willingness to do that work. And I think going back to your earlier point, Councillor, I think that will be, once we've got some steer around the focus of which you've hit on one, is having an achievable work programme, but then that brings in how we do that with the resources available. And I think it's about having, where we were pre-pandemic was having that approach of what we should all be doing anyway, and that relates to that staff development programme, how to have those conversations, as Helen has referenced, that don't compound somebody's feelings of embarrassment and further any feelings of loneliness or actual isolation, but also then working about what are the resources that we need to point specifically to this agenda in terms of how we reshape that. And I think that is where we need to, in terms of once that steering group is fully steered, for want of a better word, we will start to take that into those arenas with our partners and be asking around their responsibility and accountability to meet this agenda as well. But I think we need to build that up first, again, following the review that we've just started around the focus, but that work programme absolutely has to be in place as a reference at the start. We need to be able to make sure this is purposeful, as well as the sharing of information approaches and what works.
Councillor Zane.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for that report. It's really great to see social isolation and numbness on the agenda. I think it's extremely important, given what background I come from. In terms of mention this, I know that you mentioned earlier on it's a very difficult question to ask, but sometimes things like this should be asked, even if it's quite difficult. It does lead to more serious matters like the increase of suicide in some people, whether that's elderly or middle-aged people, where there's a high risk of isolation leading to that. My question is around, you mentioned your anchor organisations, just out of interest, what are your links to the internal organisations in the council itself? And you mentioned a few outside as well, but in terms of internal links, I know the previous group that just left, they have a lot of anchor organisations that they work with. So how closely are you working with the team that just went? I'm just thinking there's a link here. If they're working with different organisations, I suspect that you'll be linking in with the team that just previously left, or not?
Hi. There's a few things there. On our steering group, I don't know whether I've mentioned it. Have I missed TSL on there? Third sector leaders are actually represented on the group. They're kind of like the umbrella organisation for the community anchors. Plus, we've got kind of really strong links within integrated partnerships with the personalised care team and Community Plus, who link in strongly on that agenda. So there is that kind of link that's happening anyway as part and parcel of it. And I was really interested to read the report, actually, because there are so many links with the loneliness agenda. I think issues coming out, very useful intelligence, and there's definitely some links, and we can actually make sure that we get information and feed that into the strategy as we go forward.
I know my colleague Councillor Ramsey mentioned it. In terms of those roles that we created not long ago, where certain members would sit on GP commissioning groups, I'm just thinking from case example, if somebody was suffering from social isolation, they might not necessarily tell you, but there are certain things that give that away, such as the communication and the amount of communication that they're having with professionals that they might be involved with. So, for example, an incident, an elderly person might go to the GP for a physical health matter and start discussing loads of things, and then you can sort of pick up this person's not got that social contact. So how closely are we linking in with individuals' first point of contact? So does the GPs know that we're going to be working with them, and the PCNs that were driven forward for that purpose, what is on their agenda? Are they going to pick this up and try and drive it? And do they sit on those steering committees that you just mentioned?
In terms of whether they sit on the steering group, they don't directly, but the link, the conduit back into those PCNs and particularly into GP surgeries is through our personalised care roles and through our connections around there. I think in terms of the roles that have emerged more recently around the PCNs, this is a piece of work that we do need to make sure is really in view. I think the health and wellbeing strategy and those partners are, you know, we have updated in the past. I think it is I think there has been a good understanding of the impact on loneliness, on health and wellbeing, but I think it's one that we need to build back into that work programme and make sure that is being repeated in there. I think we can tighten some of those links around the roles as you referenced earlier, around the interconnections with some of the feedback around anchors. But I do feel that is something that is sharply in the view of primary care networks in terms of that loneliness, and was often the driver of wanting to create those social prescribing link worker roles in particular.
I can see the point of a person going to GP practice and being prescribed some sort of activity to try and distance themselves from loneliness and go to a community group and build those friendship networks. I'm specifically referring to the SRA roles that we commissioned, where members are sat on GP commissioning groups. Just wanting to know if social isolation and loneliness is part of their agenda. So when they go to a GP commissioning group, when they sat there in a meeting, this is an agenda, how are you addressing it from a National Health Service point of view as general practitioners, but how can we help support you in that? Do we have that relationship, and are we sitting on those tables?
I think that's something I'll have to take away and follow up to get that answer, but we will do that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Can I ask about your steering group and your priorities, please? I think it's a little bit of what Councillor Ramsey was mentioning about the steering group. How is it steering? And is it steering or is it an information exchange? And I realised that the one I observed was one where there hadn't been one for a little while, and you're building it up and everything. I understand. But I'm just wondering, how are you going to drive, how that steering group is driving the priorities that you've talked about forward. So there is a discussion in the steering group about those priorities and how that's going to feed through all the organisations. Do you know what I mean? Rather than just, exchanging information. There's actually discussion on a priority. For instance, young adults remain a priority. Is one of your key things, isn't it? So how are you going to change the steering group so it's actually driving those priorities? That's my question.
I'll start with that one. I think that is something that we need to, as already referenced, review around that priorities and what are setting out those objectives. I think it really is incumbent upon that strong leadership that is required, and I think the connections that we have, it has been held in local integrated partnerships, but I think the connections that we have across other council services and strategies and also our external partners, I think we have all the right ingredients. I think what we need to map out is that actually we make sure that it goes from the group and is put systematically and strategically into those partnership agendas. I think that is the next piece of work to do for the steering group.
Yeah. Sorry. Go on, Helen. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that actually, in terms of priorities, we do have working groups that go off and work and support those priorities. For example, when we did the befriending review, a number of members of the steering group did support that in terms of a task and finish to get that piece of work done. For example, our citizens rep worked with us on that and supported that. In terms of the young adults work, again, we've got working groups. We had a whole working group set to work on that agenda in terms of gathering the data. We're now at the point where we're looking at some of the actions. So it's not a case of just talking about it. People do go away and work on projects in terms of like things like the Live Well project. So it's not about just talking. It is about actually going away and working on projects.
And I know I only observed one meeting, but it's that steering group, where's it steering to?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And how's it doing that? And more of a discussion in that everybody's feeding back and everything like this. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Anyway, Councillor Marchington.
That's fine. Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's a very interesting area of work, and obviously pandemic has sort of highlighted some of the issues that have come up with loneliness and social isolation. And I think there's some really good research going on at the moment. So I'd like anything that we do to be evidence-based. And I think picking up on what Councillor Ramsey said about a definition, what do we mean by loneliness? And I'm picking through the report, there's that phrase chronic loneliness has an impact on health. So there's an interesting article on the radio a couple of weeks about the cultural, the issues about people we have more single-person households, and historically that's been the case as well. But there's a cultural thing about being on, the social stigma attached to being on your own, and there's all that. So if we can pick up about what we mean by loneliness, and not just a simple definition, and actually the impact of that. So it's the chronic stuff. It's where that has a negative impact on your social, or your emotional, your physical well-being, and that obviously is key. And that's what. So if we can have some, can we assess what we're doing in that respect and the scale of that? And then again, what things can we do? It's not a one-size-fits-all approach. We can signpost people. We can, but with so it might be going and engaging with people. It might be just better networks at home, things you can do, to improve your mental well-being, your health, your physical health when you're on your own. So it's not a one-size-fits-all. I do really like the idea that you're saying about separating it across the ages. I think that's vital. My adult children said it's something that cropped up about digital online media, and obviously there's risks around that, and parents worry about that and stuff like that. And it's. Yeah, so my children said, well, you don't like us contacting people online, but then when you go out to meet your friends, your parents are worrying about that as well. And I remember my parents saying that to me, because I spent a lot of time in my bedroom, which they didn't like because I was on my own. And then as soon as I started going out, they started worrying about who I was talking to and seeing. So that, obviously, it's a long time since that. But it's that similar worry about you. So actually, there is a risk-based approach to it. I think in other conversations, people, there are times in your life when you need somebody to talk to. And particularly, Councillor saying about risk of suicide and self-harm. And actually, there's things we can help people throughout their life, whatever life stage they're at, to make sure that if you're in a crisis point, there's somewhere you can turn, there's somebody you can talk to. Ideally, that's somebody who's close to you. And that's not always the case, is in a family. You might be isolated within a family context, whatever life stage you're at. So what can we do about that, And I think, again, as you get older, end of life, towards whatever the 7 ages are, but you might find it more difficult to talk. You can't talk to your children who are caring for you about that. So who do you? So it changes, doesn't it? You get people, sort of young retired people who are, my grandmother was more, went out more times in her 70s and 80s. She was out more than I was. It was when she went into residential care and she was with lots of people that it was different. And I think we do need to understand that. And it's, the support we can provide to children, caring children and things, and particularly, it's these things like that. So there's some good information, what we're doing at the moment. The course of Ageing Well, there's a brilliant course on Ageing Well, and that's about the support you provide to people in that stage. So it's, I think to the point, those definitions of what it is, what the impacts are that we can, and how we can assess what we're doing, and then I would like to see, some sort of stratification, across the life stages. And also recognising within those there's going to be a differentiation in support, and people getting the support that they need rather than necessarily the support we want to give.
Yeah, interestingly enough, from some of the conversations I've had, it's actually come up about who you could contact when you needed help. There being somebody there at the other end of a phone, because sometimes you can't always say to your nearest and dearest how you're feeling because you're worried that you'll upset them. And so it is actually having somebody there to talk to when you need to talk to them. And we're also going to, we're looking at talking to carers, aren't we, and the impact of loneliness on carers as well. Yeah, but Mark, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, I was just going to come in on that point, really. I think it's a really good point to make around definitions of loneliness, and I think we said it in the last steering group. We do talk about loneliness being a quite normal part of the human condition. Of course, it's a spectrum, and we're trying to make an impact on that chronic or severe, whatever language you want to use, around that type of loneliness. And we are using, it made me think about the evidence, you know, we're still trying to remain as evidence-based as we can around that, and using studies that we've got on evidence from Office of National Statistics and from our recent CLIC survey, where we're looking at the chronic end of loneliness as well. And you just mentioned some of it really about some of those cohorts that have come out in the data around young people. And we have sort of, as Helen said, you know, we try to be proactive in that area and work with Young Adults Connect groups to try and get that message down. And something I wanted to come in on the back of Councillor Kendrick's point, it's been proactive and not just waiting for a trickle down, but I think we have got a lot of work to do still. But, you know, with some of that data in mind, we are getting out there to those internal services and external that are working with young people, because we know that's a particular, you know, adverse impact. So we're going out with presentations on loneliness and what that means, the support that's available, how services like social prescribing, Community Plus can help, and also working on some staff guides, as Helen did over COVID as well, on how to have that conversation as well. So there's lots of work we're doing, but I think there's definitely more to do about, you know, getting that message out.
No, just be interested. I think that, yeah, I'd be interested to see as it's ongoing.
Okay, are there no more questions? No. So thank you very much for coming today. So we talked about training, and within organisations, their training and development, making loneliness a priority, greater partner involvement, the links to the anchor organisations, the links in PCNs, and those discussions, and how to support the people who need support when they need support, and about your definitions. And also you mentioned about health and wellbeing board governance. So I think if you could let us know how that's progressing as part of this work, that would be really good, because I do feel that, I don't know about anybody else, the steering group needs somewhere in the council to go to report your strategy to, so that it is highlighted at the higher levels of organisations that might not be on your steering group. Yeah? Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you very much for coming. Okay.
Thank you. Really appreciate your time, and yeah, thanks for the advice.
Thank you. Okay, right. So we'll move to item 9 then, which is the 2 lead member reports. We've a report from corporate. Unfortunately, Councillor Taylor couldn't be here today. Are there any points anybody wishes to pick up from that? The meeting that's mentioned on the page 51 at the 19th actually happened yesterday. That was one of the meetings that was delayed. Nothing to pick up on from there. So if we move to economy and neighbourhoods, Councillor Sain, is there anything you want to highlight from your reports on the work so far?
I think there's just a couple of things that have been set back from my work programme. Initially, I think we had to cancel a meeting due to the procurement process, the way it's strategy. There's some things underlying that need to be discussed before that can come forward, and it was felt that whatever discussions needed to take place in terms of procuring a contract has now been delayed, so that won't come to us until we envisage January time. However, if there are any delays, the director and the team will let us know.
That's great. Any points on economy and neighbourhoods? Councillor Ramsey?
Can I just ask, what are you procuring?
It's the waste strategy. That, yeah. There. No.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you to both panels for all the work that you're doing. Next time, I believe it is Children's and Health and Adult Social Care to report at the next meeting. Okay. So if we move to the work programme is in the papers. The next meeting is the 1st of November, and we will have the Inclusion and Diversity Annual Report will be coming. The Inclusive Communities Framework, now that will be coming back, but it'll be the implementation that's coming back We asked to see the implementation at an early stage, and that is coming back on the 1st of November. Are there any comments on the work programme? No? Councillor Ramsey?
Yeah, it's me. I'm struggling to know exactly what's coming up when, so I'm glad you're telling us, because it's not easy to read. A lot of it seems to have been what's already happened, so I don't know whether I've got the right one or... Perfect, that might help me.
Yeah, okay, so the draft agenda plan will be circulated as well as the work programme. Okay. All right, thank you. And then we move to any other business. And has any panel member got any other business? I just have one item to report on. Since the last meeting, I've been consulted on an urgent key decision in respect of an award of grant funding from the Department of Work and Pensions to deliver the Local Supported Employment Initiative. Agreed that calling could be waived as the decision was required to receive the grant and enter into a funding agreement. Confirmation of the successful application funding was received on the 16th of August, and the returned signed grant agreement had to be back by the 26th of August. So it was very short time scales. So calling was waived. Councillor Ramsey. I think it's on the key decision. There's on the forward plan on the key decision, it will say the amounts. Okay. Okay, so thank you very much, everybody. That ends the formal meeting of the panel. Thank you.